Hi, I'm Gary Stearman. Welcome to Prophecy Watchers. We have a very special guest today. His name is Josh Peck, and I think after today you're going to remember that name. Josh, welcome to Prophecy Watchers.
It's great talking with you again. Thanks so much for having me back on.
Josh, I've got a couple of books here, or that is Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes, sir.
I asked Josh, why 2 volumes? He said, well, for technical reasons, there was so much there, we had to put it in 2 volumes. Mm-hmm. But the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think everybody's heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls, but they don't really know what they are, what they say, when were they written, who wrote them.
Yeah.
Why did you take up this subject?
Well, there's a lot of amazing history here, and I had those same questions when I first heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I at first was even a little apprehensive about them because I thought, well, is that the Bible? But one of the things that was really interesting early on when I first started this research is actually in the Dead Sea Scrolls, every book of the Bible, except Esther, but every book of the Bible of the Old Testament it was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So just from a historical point, what it shows, and these were written at least a couple of hundred years before Christ. Many of them were earlier, but it was at least up to that time. And what makes them really interesting is it shows the validity of the Old Testament. There's a common argument, especially around college campuses nowadays, that say, well, how can you believe the Bible when it's been changed so much, over hundreds and a couple thousand years? It's exchanged hands and it's been translated and changed and changed. Well, what we can do with the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's the oldest copy that we have of the Old Testament. We can look at that and then we can look at our modern Bibles today and realize, oh, wow, they actually match up really well. So that blows that argument out of the water. The Bible hasn't been changed.
The Bible hasn't been changed. And there's a lot of discussion about the ancient portions of the Bible, the early years, from Genesis 1:1 and right on, up through the flood, and much discussion. And you're saying that that was not a forgotten subject.
That's right. Yeah, it's all in there. And what's even more interesting about it as well, at least to me, is among the Dead Sea Scrolls were also extra biblical books that the original writers, they would have been called the Zadokian priests. A lot of times we call them the Essenes. They're technically 2 sort of different groups, but they go hand in hand. Essene was just a general term around Israel if they believed in the Zadokian way, the people of Qumran, the priests that lived in Qumran at that time, if they believed in that way, rather than the Pharisees or Sadducees. And the Zadokian priests, their way of belief was basically what the Old Testament teaches, like how we would interpret it. This is extremely similar. So they had other extra biblical books, including Jubilees, Enoch, some of these books that people might be familiar with, and they held them to high regard. So we have access to those as well. Not only is there great history that provides a lot of context in the Bible. For example, what happened between the Old Testament and New Testament? Why is the New Testament, why is Israel so different than the Old Testament? Well, all of that's explained. There's really good history there. So nothing in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the extra biblical books, actually changes the Bible, but it provides a lot of context. There's also a lot of exciting prophecy in there too.
Speaking of exciting, I have to ask, what's the most exciting thing you found when you were writing these books, these volumes?
The most exciting thing was how much is in there about our time today, or
really?
what I believe is our time today.
Now, if you say that,
I know I got to back it up.
That's right. Yeah. You're talking now prophecy.
Yes.
Okay.
So what's amazing is they had a prophetic calendar. They had their own calendar that they said was the original calendar that God gave to Adam in Genesis, and it was a solar calendar. So this is different than what the lunar calendar of the Pharisees at the time was, but they had a solar calendar that they believed was exactly the original that they always followed. And in that calendar, there's certain prophetic cycles. So they have, just like we have decades and centuries and things like that, they also split up time, but it was usually around 7s and 50s. So they would have a Shemitah, which was 7 years. They had a Jubilee, which was 50 years. They had an Ona, which was 500 years. And then they had an Age, which was 2,000 years. Well, we can take that calendar and we can actually backtrack that now with all the information that we have available through the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we can find out that they counted the end of the age of Torah at what our year 75 AD would have been. And then 2,000 years is an age. So we just add 2,000 years, we get 2075 for the end of our age of grace, which they actually called it that. Now, when I say that, I don't want people to freak out because I'm not saying that we have to wait until 2075 for Jesus to return. Because remember, when Jesus came the first time, he was probably crucified around 32 AD, somewhere around there. Well, that's quite a ways earlier than 75 AD. So, I've wondered, well, could we see a repeat of that? Could Jesus return early in our final 50 years, our final Jubilee, which that begins early to mid-March of 2026. So we're like right there. Could Jesus return early in our Jubilee? And could there be a gap of time somewhere? Perhaps a gap of time between the rapture and the beginning of the tribulation, perhaps a gap of time between when Jesus returns and when the official starting date of the millennium begins. And there's several different ways that this could all pan out. So in the book, I do not try to provide an exact date of when the rapture is or when Jesus is going to return.
I don't know. Not.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think if we look at all the prophecies and put them together, we can at least ascertain the season. And I think, at least I hope, hope's probably a better word, I hope that sometime within this final Jubilee, we should start to see a lot of prophecies being fulfilled.
And things are happening on planet Earth that people are pointing at right now, particularly in the Middle East and particularly in Israel. Mm-hmm. And that puts it right back home.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you're excited about that.
Very.
We're excited about prophecy, and there is the eternal question. Can we calculate the date of the rapture? And so many people have tried.
Yeah, and 100% of them have failed.
That's right. But I think we're supposed to be excited about the Lord's return.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, speculating and trying to think, well, maybe it's this or maybe it's that, I think that the Lord delights in that. I think that when we get excited about what he has to offer us, I think when it turns bad is when people get ugly about it, or they try to set an exact date and they get people riled up and saying it's definitely going to happen now. Go ahead and sell your house or run up your credit cards. And I actually put in the conclusion of the book, I say, hey, all of this is exciting, but if I were a betting man, the safest bet is 2025, 2026, it's going to come and go and nothing's going to happen. If I had to bet. So I say in there, don't run up your credit cards, don't sell your house, don't do anything ridiculous like that. Just study this stuff, study prophecy, and get excited about what the Lord is revealing.
Well, my idea about calculating the date of Christ's coming is he could come today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's it.
That's right. And if we live every day like that, then every day we can have that excitement and that expectation.
And there's great motivation there.
Yes, for sure. And man, that is one of the biggest straw man arguments against the pre-trib rapture stuff, because I do write about the pre-trib rapture in here and I connect it with Dead Sea Scrolls stuff. But one of the biggest attacks is well, where's the motivation then? If you're pre-trib, you're just waiting for God to come and rescue you and you get to escape. It's well, yeah, we do get to escape, but that gives us more motivation that we know it could happen tomorrow, so we better get busy and get souls saved. I would imagine the other, if I was post-trib, I don't know if I personally would be that motivated, because it's well, we got to wait for all this other stuff. I know I got at least 7 more years. So
now I want to go back to the books for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
You used a word a minute ago, Zadokian.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean, and why should we even examine that?
Yeah, so in the Bible, God said that the true priests of Israel were supposed to come through the line of Zadok. And Israel had messed all that up. Yes. And they started having priests and kings that didn't come from the lines they were supposed to. So it's a long story. It has to do with the intertestamental period, but the basic rundown of it is when all of that was going on, and when Israel, the Pharisees and Sadducees, were adopting this new lunar calendar, the I guess you could say the true believers in the way that we're supposed to understand the Old Testament, they said, okay, no, we're not doing that. They went to Qumran and they kept the traditions of what's actually written in the Bible, as opposed to just the traditions of the fathers, like what the Pharisees and Sadducees were doing. So those were the Zadokian priests. And when they appointed a priest, they would make sure that it was from the line of Zadok, just like God said it was supposed to be. So that's why we use that term. And then the word Essene just comes in around that time, there were a lot of different beliefs, just like today. There was a lot of different interpretations, but the three main ones were Pharisee, Sadducee, and Essene. So there were a lot of Essenes all throughout Israel. It's not that all Essenes were in Qumran. It's just if you believed in that interpretation, you were an Essene. It's kind of like, only in structure, not in theology, but it's kind of like how the Catholic Church in the Vatican is set up. If you're at the Vatican working, you're a certain thing, a priest or whatever they call it. But if you're just out in the public and you're a Catholic, then you're a Catholic. But they all kind of believe the same thing. The structure was similar back then. The Zadokian priest, and I want to make sure it's just the structure, not the theology. I'm not saying they were actually Catholic. Just in the structure that the Zadokian priests in Qumran were kind of running the show and teaching and doing all that. And then the students of that, the people that believed in that interpretation, were Essenes.
We're talking with Josh Peck, and by the way, occasionally you'll find his articles in the Prophecy Watcher.
That's right.
And let's just break for a moment, and you can find out how to subscribe to our magazine.
10 years ago, we began an exciting journey, a mission dedicated to spreading the good news of the soon return of Jesus. In the last 2 years, tens of thousands of Prophecy Watchers from all over the world have subscribed to our monthly magazine, The Prophecy Watcher. 12 DVDs on Bible prophecy can be yours when you subscribe to our 48-page full-color magazine for just 1 year, print or digital format, all for a gift of $50, with shipping included in the USA. Recent events have turned the world upside down. The COVID-19 pandemic was followed by Russia's war in Ukraine, all overshadowed by the horrific October 7th tragedy in Israel. The prophets of the Bible predicted a series of end-time wars, and we're seeing the final pieces of the puzzle fall into place. Russia, China, Iran, Syria, Turkey. The enemies of Israel are on the doorstep, just as the Bible predicted some 2,500 years ago. The Prophecy Watcher magazine includes the writing of dozens of prophecy experts like Gary Stearman, Mando Gonzalez, L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, Josh Peck, and many others, writing on fascinating subjects like the Rapture, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Red Heifer, the World Economic Forum, the Global Reset, digital currency, the Mark of the Beast, the Nephilim, and the Antichrist Beast's system of global control. Things you will likely never hear about in church. 12 bonus DVDs will introduce you to Ezekiel's Gog and Magog war. We'll examine the supernatural side of the Bible as we investigate controversial issues like the Nephilim, government UFO cover-ups, and the Shroud of Turin. We'll address the Luciferian rebellion, a mutiny that changed heaven and earth forever. Speaking of heaven, you'll enjoy Mondo's glimpse into God's creation as he explores the stunning beauty of the stars and galaxies, seen through the lens of our Psalm 19 observatory cameras. 12 issues of the magazine plus 12 bonus DVDs, a $180 value, now available for your gift of $50 to support our worldwide television outreach. Care to become a fellow Prophecy Watcher? Just visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. Partner with us today and help us take the message of the soon return of Jesus to the whole world.
And we're back with Josh Peck. This is fascinating to me because before the break, you were getting into something very, very interesting, and that is when you think of the Jewish people, the 12 tribes, you think of their prophets, but the people themselves often do not believe the prophets.
Right. And that was a big deal during that time too, because the Pharisees and Sadducees had thought that all prophecy had ceased. But the Zadokian priests and the Essenes fully believed in prophecy. They were running the school of the prophets still. And so when you see prophets around that time, they were most likely Essene because they were the only ones that actually believed prophecy still exists. And isn't it interesting that we're kind of in that today? We're kind of in a situation today where there's people that fully don't believe in prophecy at all. and there are many who do. So it's one of the other more surprising things when I was studying this is seeing the issues that the Essenes were having, not only within themselves, because there were heretical factions as well, but with the other ruling classes at the time, and how similar that is to our day today. A lot of the same things, a lot of the same strange beliefs. I mean, within the Essenes, they had heretical factions that were basically what we would call sacred namers today. They believed that the name itself was so important that you had to get it exactly right, otherwise God's not going to hear your prayers. They had this hyper view of idolatry where, they said, and this wasn't the main Essenes, these were heretical factions, but where you can't even carry a coin with somebody's face on it because that's an idol, and that's the same as worshiping an idol. Kind of like how you can't have a Christmas tree in your house at Christmas because it's an idol. I mean, all this stuff is so familiar, and I wrote a chapter in the book about that because I found it so interesting that it's like, wow, there really is nothing new under the sun. The same issues that the true believing Jewish people of the time were dealing with, we as Christians, the true believing Christians, we're dealing with those same issues.
Now, you've got a chapter in here about the Essene calendar.
Yes.
Now, we've talked with Ken Johnson from time to time. He's gone deeply into that.
Yeah.
But it's really, tell everybody why that calendar is so interesting.
Oh man, well, the prophecies found in it. I mean, the cycles that they use. And Ken has done an amazing job. He's actually because he can read the ancient texts. I don't know how to read ancient Hebrew, so I rely on Ken's work a lot, which, by the way, he wrote the foreword to my book, so I'm not like just taking his work or anything. But he's helped me out quite a bit, understand the calendar and its importance and how it works. And what's so important and so interesting about this calendar is you can take this calendar, the Essene calendar, and from any book from Genesis to Revelation, and it fits perfectly. It fits every day count you get in Genesis with the flood, everything with Moses and going up the mountain for so many days, and you can match this on this calendar and it fits perfectly. But even more interesting than the historical stuff is the prophetic stuff. We have a lot of day counts in prophecy, 1260 days till this, 1290 days till that. You can actually map that out and answer some really interesting questions. So it's been, for example, this is kind of a smaller one, but it's been a big debate in Christianity, those at least that study prophecy. When do the two witnesses arrive? Is it the first half of the tribulation or the second half? And there's arguments on either side, but with this calendar, you can definitively answer it and say it's got to be the first half because it's the only way those day counts work. If you try to put them in the second half, they just don't work. And so there's little things like that, but that can help us pull together these prophecies and try to construct at least a rough timeline of what the tribulation is, when these things are actually going to happen, which I attempt to do in the book.
Josh Peck is his name. A little subtitle here, The Lost Prophecies of Qumran. Everybody's heard of Qumran. And they've heard that there used to be a discrete, almost like a little city.
Yeah.
It had all of its facilities, and the people who lived there were very, very special people.
Yep.
Who had a strict way of interpreting the ancient documents.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, because they didn't want to fall into what they considered, and they didn't want to fall into the sins of the Pharisees or the Sadducees. They actually had harsh words against them and called them children of darkness, and they called themselves the children of light, the sons of light. So they really took the text seriously. Like when you think of a Berean, or when you think of somebody today that just really drills into the text and they don't want to go on all these flights of fancy and try to reinterpret the Bible to mean what they want, but really stay true to the text. That was the Zadokian priests. That's what they did. So I just love it. And so far, I have not found anything in the Dead Sea Scrolls that contradicts the Bible. It adds a lot of context, doesn't change anything. The theology is the same, and it's really pre-Christianity. There's a big question in academia, like what happened to the Essenes? Like what happened to Qumran? Why did they leave? Where did they go? Why did they leave these scrolls behind? Well, what happened is they got saved, they became Christians, and they took the Great Commission out to the world. Like they took it seriously. And so it's amazing to know that we come from this. We're the beneficiaries of this amazing group of people in their texts.
What a story. What a story that is. I just have to stop and think about that a minute. These very righteous Jews, very scholarly Jews at Qumran were there when Jesus came.
Yeah, and they knew what to look for, because even in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there were specific prophecies of when Jesus was going to arrive.
Do you suppose he visited their village?
Yep, I'm sure he did. Yeah, I have no doubt about it. But this is why in the Gospels, like there are times where Jesus can talk to a whole group of people, like thousands of people, and they all get saved with him barely having to say anything. But then there's other times where he'll talk to a few people, and no matter what he says, no matter what miracle, they just will not accept it. Well, the people that accepted Jesus so easily were primarily Essenes, because they had these prophecies that they were looking for. They had an amazing Dead Sea Scroll called the Melchizedek document, and in that it actually tells what Shemitah in their calendar, like exactly what year basically to look for the Messiah, even being killed. And they had that right down to the year. So when that happened, so many got saved because they've been waiting their whole lives for this. So they knew exactly what they were looking for. Whereas the Pharisees and Sadducees, they had completely different interpretations. They were looking for something else that was totally different. So it's technically a myth. We hear sometimes, no Jew in Israel knew at the time what the Messiah was going to be. None of them knew. That's actually a myth. The Essenes knew what to look for. It's just the Pharisees and the Sadducees that we hear the most about, they had no clue because they had totally different interpretations.
So it makes sense that Qumran set itself apart.
Yes.
And became a discrete little city.
Yep.
And because they were probably rejected. A lot of people probably thought of them as kooks.
Yeah.
People who took it too far.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
It does sound familiar, indeed. The forgotten prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls. These are heavy documents. I've read a few excerpts. Haven't had a chance to read both volumes in detail, but you have a great writing style.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I try to keep it simple. I know these are dense topics for sure, but I try to write the way that I speak. I try to write it so anybody can understand it. I don't overcomplicate things. I'm not technically an academic or anything like that. So when people get this book, you're going to actually be able to understand what you're reading.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, if you write a book, you're an academic.
Yeah, I guess so.
And so, Josh, as we come closer to the end of this program, what would you have people take away from this study that you've done?
Yeah, so one of the main things is I don't want people to take it too far because that tends to happen with any of these things.
No date setting?
Yeah, that, and in the introduction, I actually, I introduced the audience in the book to how we got our Bibles in the first place, because there's a lot of debate. People who really enjoy the Dead Sea Scrolls, they say, well, shouldn't they be in the Bible? It's like, well, you don't really want that, because for one thing, if they were, your Bible would be so thick, like it would be so hard to get anybody saved. It's like, okay, you're saved, Jesus, here's this stack of papers to read that'll take you 90 years. Like it just practically speaking, it would make the Bible way too long. But not only that, I look at the Dead Sea Scrolls more as history. Now, they may have been inspired during that time for those people. Are they inspired now? I don't know. I think the safe way to take them is take it as history, and if there is ever a contradiction between something in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Bible, then you got to take the Bible every time. I haven't found any. That doesn't mean that there's not, but so I would say, enjoy the Dead Sea Scrolls for what they are. We can definitely learn from the history. That provides a ton of context in our Bibles. We can learn a lot from the prophecy. That adds context to our prophecies as well.
We hear that story about the little boys chasing a lost sheep or something, and they threw a rock in a cave and they found a scroll, and everybody said, well, just an accident. No, that was no accident.
It happened at the exact same time Israel was becoming a nation.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's like that's not a coincidence.
Not a coincidence at all. And God unfolded these manuscripts at just the proper time.
And what's amazing too is the very first scroll that was discovered was Isaiah, and specifically there's a prophecy about the old one speaking out of the dust of the ground. Well, that's probably the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, we're not thinking that it's like an actual resurrection of the dead prophets and stuff, but that's probably the Dead Sea Scrolls. Their voices are crying out from the ground. That's exactly what happened. And so not only do we get all this validation for the Bible, the Old Testament that we already had, but we get all these extra insights that provide a lot of context to things that we already know.
We're talking with Josh Peck. We're going to pause now, and you can discover just how you can obtain your own copy of Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
For centuries, believers have searched the scriptures for the date of the rapture, the date Jesus takes his bride home to heaven. Even though we're told that we can't know the day or the hour of the Lord's return, well-intentioned Christians have set one date after another, only to see those dates come and go. As you know, we're not date setters here at Prophecy Watchers, but we are watching the signs of the times very closely. Enter Josh Peck, Ken Johnson, and the ancient calendar of the Essenes. I can remember my first trip to Israel, driving by the caves at Qumran, where the scrolls were first discovered by a stone-throwing shepherd boy. Most of the world has no concept of how important this discovery was to the credibility of the Bible. These scrolls have never contradicted the Bible and appear to be not just reliable early copies of the Bible, but prove that the Essene community at Qumran looked for the Jewish Messiah at the same time Jesus appeared on the scene. They even predicted that he would die for the sins of mankind. The Essenes had their own unique calendar, which has stirred up controversy in Christian circles. Using this ancient calendar, Jewish feast days, Shemitah cycles, and Jubilee years, their research leads us to believe that we are the generation that will see the return of Jesus. Josh's advanced research is exciting, revealing things that have been secreted away for thousands of years. He had so much material, he had to squeeze it into 2 volumes. Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls, Unlocking the Final Jubilee of the Church Age, is available in 2 individual $25 volumes with shipping included anywhere in the USA. When you purchase both volumes for your gift of $50, we'll include a 2-volume DVD set as a free bonus. End Time Prophecies in the Book of Enoch features Gary Stearman and Dead Sea Scroll researcher Ken Johnson. While Enoch is not part of the canon of Scripture, it offers fascinating historical information on the Nephilim and the tribulation period from these 2 Bible prophecy experts. Call us toll-free at the number you see on your screen, available 24/7, or visit us online at prophecywatchers.tv. For our international friends, please note that additional shipping fees do apply and all prices listed are in US dollars. Thanks for watching today, and thanks for supporting this End Times ministry. As we get closer to the return of Christ, we're working harder than ever to take the gospel message to the whole world. Partner with us and be a part of God's great plan of salvation through His Son, the Jewish Messiah, Jesus Christ.
Well, we're back with Josh Peck, and by the way, you're very interesting to talk to because
thank you.
You do not hesitate.
Right.
I mean, when I ask a question, you come back with not just an answer, but a good explanation of what you've been studying here, and I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you. I have too. Well, you know, I'm genuinely excited about this topic. I love the Dead Sea Scrolls and what they can provide to Christians. And yeah, of course, there's always going to be the danger that some Christians or some people are going to take it way too far and say that, you know, if you don't follow the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, then you're not really saved or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
But I hope in the book that I provided a good balance to show, like, yeah, these are important, but if you're a Christian that's just not interested in this stuff, or you're just not there yet, I know for me to even read the Book of Enoch, it took me a little while because I was brought up in a really really straight-laced church where they just wouldn't have tolerated anything like that. So it took me a little while to get used to the idea of what Enoch actually is and what it isn't, and same with all these other books as well. So you know, I look at them and I don't alter any core theology that I've learned from the Bible based on the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's nothing like that in there. It provides great context and even more information about prophecies that we're already familiar with in the Bible. And I think if people pick up the set, they're going to see that and get hopefully just as excited as I am about it.
His name's Josh Peck. He's a very good writer, easy read, and by the way, you'll find it fascinating. We've got to talk about this again sometime.
Absolutely, anytime. I'm in town now, so anytime you want me here, I'm here.
Josh, thank you very much.
Thank
I'm
you.
Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are.